Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. We've been working around the clock with the Orange County Sheriff's Department since Blaze Bernstein was reported missing on January the 3rd. As the search continued, Blaze's family, friends, fellow Orange County residents, and tens of thousands of people around the world were all hoping that there was an innocent explanation as to why Blaze did not return home. We were all hopeful that he'd show up and reunite with his family and friends, and family life would resume as usual. As we all became sadly aware last week, that was not the case. This morning, the Orange County District Attorney's Office filed one felony count of murder with a sentencing enhancement of personal use of a knife against 20-year-old Newport Beach resident Samuel Woodward. As prosecutors, we have an ethical duty to file charges that are supported by the evidence that's in our possession, evidence that would prove the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. This investigation is ongoing, and we're continuing to search for evidence that might support special circumstances allegations. As I just stated, the investigation is ongoing, but there are a few facts that we're able to release at this time. The suspect, Samuel Woodward, knew Blaze, the victim, from when they went to school at Orange County School of the Arts. Woodward is 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighs 185 pounds. Blaze was 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed 135 pounds. Woodward is accused of communicating with Blaze through Snapchat on January 2nd. Woodward is accused of picking up Blaze at his parents' home in Lake Forest after they spoke via social media. The exact time and place of the murder is still under investigation. He's accused of having abrasions, scratches, and dirt on his hands. He's also accused of cleaning up the car that he used the night that he picked up Blaze. Woodward is still accused of visiting the crime scene days after the murder. This case was solved through old-fashioned detective work and surveillance, as well as sophisticated examination of digital, physical, and DNA evidence. This is a senseless murder of a young man who possessed a combination of a high-caliber mind and the heart of a poet. We, at the Orange County District Attorney's Office, offer our sincerest condolences to the Bernstein family. Blaze should be back at college right now, doing what college kids do, going to class, organizing study notes, hanging out with his friends, dreaming about who they were going to become. I know he was treasured by his family and loved by his friends. Unfortunately, in this case, there have been many reports and speculations, many from unattributed sources. We have been and will continue to investigate tips and evidence. Anyone with information is encouraged to contact our Homicide Unit Supervising Investigator, Corey DeGraffenried, at 714-347-8492. Our priority on this brutal murder of a 19-year-old Ivy League student is to make sure that Woodward is brought to justice and held accountable. Because of that, the Orange County District Attorney's Office will not reveal additional information about this case until the preliminary hearing. As a community, we hope that this case might serve as an opportunity for tolerance and understanding. We'll be open for questions, but I will ask people to state their names, speak into the mic, because it's all being recorded. Michelle?
It's Michelle Geely, KCAL 9 CBS 2 News. Can you please talk about meditation, premeditation? Is there an allegation of premeditation in this case?
So the question is whether or not if we could talk about premeditation. When we file murder charges, we don't file allegations of premeditation and deliberation. The degree of murder, which whether it's first degree or second degree, is included in that. So at a later time during a trial, a jury or trier of fact would consider whether or not there was premeditation and deliberation in making that determination.
You also indicated that the suspect, Sam Woodward, visited the crime scene days after the murder. What can you tell us about that?
The question is that I stated that the suspect visited the crime scene days after the murder, and that's all I can tell you about that. I'm not really able to expand on our statements of the case at this point. There was a question way in the back.
Andrew Mullenbeck, KFI. It was really the same sort of question about visiting. How many days after was it that he went back to the scene, and was he being surveilled at that particular time?
Well, I think I did explain that there was surveillance, and that was a big part of the investigation that was taking place. I really am not able to expand on it any further. I think that I have revealed what we can up to this point.
Tony Gregley, ABC7. The Bernstein parents have alluded in a statement that this may have been possibly a hate crime. Can you address that at all?
Yes. As I said, this is an ongoing investigation. We are continuing to investigate. We're looking through all matters of communication, all the things that were said and done, and working to try to determine that. And we have an obligation to file charges only if there's sufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that allegation. So a hate crime or a special circumstance allegation requires that level of proof. So we're looking for that evidence, and if and when we find it, we will amend the charges and file that.
So you've not ruled it out?
Oh, absolutely not.
Kana Whitworth, ABC News. Based on the evidence that Woodward cleaned up his vehicle, do you believe that the body was moved? Are you investigating that? Is there possibly another crime scene somewhere?
I cannot expand on that. I can tell you that he was in a vehicle, or that he had a vehicle that he had been using, and that he was cleaning that up, and that the surveillance revealed that.
Amy Taxon, AP. If you could please talk a little bit about why he picked him up at 11 p.m. on the 2nd, and what they were ostensibly going to do. You have the communications, so some idea of what they were driving around doing.
Question is basically, why did he pick him up? And we're still working on that. That's still evidence that has to be revealed. Hopefully we'll be able to develop more.
Chip Yost with KTLA. Can you tell us anything you know about their prior relationship, as far as were they friends in high school, were they acquaintances? What was the nature of their relationship, and how far back did it go?
We know that they both went to the same high school. We do not have any evidence that they were friends in high school, and that's about it. That's as much as I can say about that.
What about more recently? How long had they been communicating before they met up that night?
I'm not able to try to expand on that. It would require some speculation on my part, actually. We don't really have the evidence to support.
Can you talk about why you said you are still looking at the possibility of a hate crime?
The question is why we are still looking at the possibility of a hate crime. Well, first of all, understand we're open to all of the evidence, and we're still looking at all the evidence. We have a substantial amount of work to do on that, and it's going to take a little bit of time. Some of that is in the form of communications between the defendant and the suspect, or the defendant and other people, or the suspect and other people. So there might be a substantial amount of communication. We have to look at all that before we can make a decision like that. The question of a hate crime is one question that we have about the possibility of special circumstances, and so we're looking to see whether or not that might be supported. Yes, sir.
I have the microphone, that's why I was saying that. You're live on Good Day LA right now. Our viewers very concerned about the family. How is the victim's family holding up?
Well, the question, how is the victim's family holding up? Listen, that's a great question. They're very distraught. They are they're taking an attitude of working on the case. They're being active in trying to learn all of the things that have taken place, all the communications, all the possibilities. So that's what they're doing at this point. I can't, this was a treasured young man, a son that they loved, and that is very much at the forefront of their thoughts and actions.
Cara Finstrom with KCBS. There was an affidavit that was published that I know has since been sealed, and there's been a lot of reporting on information that was included in that. Can you explain to us why some of that is not being included here today? A little bit about your investigative process, what your process is?
What I can do at this point is just fill in some basic facts that are very clear, and I don't want to, and I think it would be improper to try to fill that in further at this point, because we're still investigating. We don't have all of the evidence yet, and we still have a duty as officers of the court not to go into too much detail in these matters. So we're doing what we can, and as the evidence, as we get more evidence, we'll be able to fill these details better in our own files, basically, and much of it might be used and revealed at the preliminary hearing when we get that, but probably not before that.
Tony, Vicky Vargas at NBCLA. Two things. One that seems to be glaringly missing in here is the issue of motive. And at the news conference, you had said both the Woodwards and the Bernsteins are two families that, I think the word was suffering, or who are going to be feeling pain through this. So motive, and why do you feel that for both families?
So as far as motive is concerned, we haven't completed the investigation, so we have a ways to go before we can actually determine something about motive that would be supported by the evidence. And before we can say anything like that, it really does need to be supported by the evidence. So we need evidence beyond a reasonable doubt before we can start talking about why this happened or why that happened. So to do so would be to speculate, and I'm just really not free to do that.
And the family, you had said you felt the Woodward family.
So we talked about the Bernstein family. They are they're hurting. They're distraught. This is a terrible thing that's been visited upon them. I mean, their son, much loved, successful, wonderful young man, suddenly disappeared and had been murdered. It's the difficulty here is I don't want to be equating the defendant and the suspect, because that's just not right. I mean, we have a murderer and we have a victim, but I think that needs to be clear, and I don't want there to be any question about am I talking about showing some sympathy for the murderer? We're going to bring charges against this person, and we're going to bring the maximum charges that we can bring based on the evidence, and if there's a special circumstance, we're going to bring that. So that's our direction. That comment was made had to do with the defendant's family. Those are people who are shocked and distraught and hurt as well, and so that's their circumstance, and so that's why I was just suggesting to give them, as family members who had nothing to do with any wrongdoing, to give them a little space.
Paul Anderson, City News Service. I know that in a lot of these kinds of cases, when you're relying on communications through mobile devices, et cetera, that it can be an uphill battle with the telecoms in getting that evidence. Is that also part of the ongoing investigation, that you're still waiting to get a lot of communications through the telecommunication companies? Is that also something that's part of why you're not able to really get more into the motive, et cetera.
Yes, we're doing all we can to fill in, to get what we can about that, about everything that happened, all the communications, what were the circumstances that led to this, and so that requires a lot of work. We need to develop all of the digital and forensic evidence to see what we can find. Yes.
The issue of bail, at this point, Woodward has been held on no bail. It appears by the charge that was filed today, he will be afforded the opportunity to post bail. What can you tell us about that? And we know that there are people in Newport Beach who are concerned about him returning to the family home.
He will have a bail hearing today, and I mean, I think that's we will argue about the bail, and we'll state our position that he shouldn't get out, that in the event that he's bailed out, that a very tight leash or very tight control is kept on him. We're very concerned also about the neighborhoods, the families, and the safety of all concerned. I think so it's known to everyone. I think that there's a likelihood of bail being set because it's a murder case, but it's not a special circumstance case. In a case where no bail could be, the requirement would be a case where there's a special circumstance and the evidence is strong and the presumption great, as it's stated in the penal code. So the likelihood here is that there will be bail, but the set scheduled amount on the bail schedule is $1 million. We don't think that's enough. We're going to work to try to make it as high as we can under the circumstances, and there's some. Well, you'll hear the arguments in court, but we have some reasons to suggest that the bail should be higher than that.
Yes. Tony, our understanding is from the jail is that Sam is under medical observation, whether physical or psychological. Do you have any details about why that is happening?
Right, got that. But what was the end of the question?
Details as to why that is happening?
No.
Sarah Welch, Channel 5. Did Woodward confess to stabbing Blaze Bernstein?
I'm going to say two things. Well, let me just say one thing. I'm not at liberty to discuss any statements that Woodward might have made to police, and so I really can't answer that question.
Can you talk about how he was killed?
Well, he was stabbed.
And do you believe it was an act of rage?
We can't get any more detail on that.
Can you talk at all about the weapon? You say it's a knife. Any more specifics on what kind of knife?
No.
And where it might have come from?
With regard to the amendment of charges, either charging him with special circumstances or downgrading from murder to, say, manslaughter, when might that occur and what is the process?
Well, it might occur anytime. Anytime that we get additional evidence of special circumstances, we can file that. So it could be a week or months. So that's that. Now, I know you talked about downgrading. I don't anticipate that.
Can you talk a little bit, you mentioned you are looking into whether this might be a hate crime. Can you talk at all about what aspects of a hate crime this might be? Because there's lots of different theories about why he might have been targeted.
Yeah, the question is whether or not I can talk about what aspects of a possible hate crime it might be, and the answer is I'm just not, I can't do that.
Hi, Tony. This is Ann Doe at the LA Times. I'm curious about the background of the suspect. What can you tell us about what he's been doing with his time? What is he studying in college? How well are his family and friends cooperating?
Yeah, I'm not able to fill you in anymore about the background of the suspect.
You touched a little bit on the surveillance. I know there's some areas you can't go into there, but can you say that they had those 3 days of searches where the body didn't turn up? Did the surveillance lead to detectives going back and looking at a particular spot? Did they see the suspect looking at a particular area, leading them to that area on that Tuesday when they found the body?
I'm not able to give you that kind of detail. I can tell you that there was substantial surveillance, and that was a good part of the investigation. Yes.
We know that Blaze left behind his glasses, his wallet, his cash, his credit cards. Can you talk about that, how that is working in your investigation? Do we know, I mean, did he leave in a hurry?
I'm sorry, I can't talk about those details. I appreciate your curiosity and how you'd want to know, but I'm just not at liberty to convey what the inferences might be from that sort of evidence, at least certainly not at this point.
Are you using his cell phone, and as I understand, his mom's cell phone as they had switched, but are you using his cell phone as part of this investigation?
We're using all of the possible digital forensic information that we can find.
And is that part of your investigation into the hate crime? That's some of the communication that you're going through?
Yes.
Has a murder weapon been found?
I can't talk about that.
Can you talk about the DNA, you say there's DNA evidence, what that consists of or how that match was made, if he was trying to avoid giving his DNA to investigators?
The question is about the DNA evidence, and about all the detail I can tell you about on the DNA evidence is that there was the victim's DNA on property that was in the control of the defendant.
Just if they were together, why would that necessarily mean that he would be a murder suspect? What about it leads to the allegation?
I just can't get into that kind of detail explanation. But I appreciate your questions. Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for being here and for your time and your attention.